Terror was an era of the French Revolution, during which thousands were executed. This was a period of both brutal repression and dreadful leadership. Anywhere from 20,000 to 40,000 people were killed, including anyone from peasants to the highest-ranked nobles.
In July 1789, mobs in Paris stormed a hated prison called the Bastille. The mob forced the imprisonment upon Louis and his family for treason upon the country. His attempt to escape the country in 1791 failed. He was captured and returned to France. The king's defense was based on the fact that trying him was illegal. The king could not be allowed to commit treason without being punished. The death penalty was passed with the vote at 387 to 334. Those in favor of the king were accused of royalism. The process took a total of 5 days. The National Convention condemned Louis XVI to death on January 20th, 1793. He was set to be executed the following day. He was accompanied by an English priest living in France named Henry Essex Edgeworth, who recorded the event.
The streets were lined with citizens, all armed, some with pikes and some with guns, and the carriage was surrounded by a body of troops, formed of the most desperate people in Paris. As another precaution, they had placed before the horses a number of drums, intended to drown any noise or murmur in favor of the king, and in the street nothing was to be seen but armed citizens.
After their previous king was decapitated, cries of Vive la République could be heard throughout the streets.
In April of 1793, the Committee of Public Safety was created in order to protect the nation from both domestic and foreign enemies, and answer to the demands of the Republic. Under their leader, George Danton, the committee didn't plan on any radical reforms. However, with the current state of the country, more radical leaders took control of the committee. This included Maximilien Robespierre, the new leader who wanted to defend the revolution. With the support of the Jacobins, they took harsh measures against the enemies of the Republic. Robespierre was quoted saying, "The goal of the constitutional government is to conserve the Republic. The aim of the revolutionary government owes to the good citizen all the protection of the nation. It owes nothing to the enemies of the people but death."
The Committee of Public Safety was created during the Reign of Terror, and their most urgent business was the war that was going on in France. On August 17, 1793, the convention voted for the Levée-et-Masse, which required all citizens to serve as soldiers or suppliers in the war effort. The Levée-et-Masse was used to bring everyone in France together to fight for a main cause, which basically promotes nationalism. During the years of 1791 and 1792, around 300,000 men were recruited to the army, which then strengthens the army to around 1 million men. It was successful in getting more men into the army, but many men tried to avoid the draft.
The convention and the committee both believed that they were going to create a new equal republic to replace the old monarchy and aristocracy. Because the old system was founded on Christianity, they believed getting rid of it would be the first step to create a new society. The first thing they did was change the Christian calendar, which dated from the death of Christ. The new calendar began with the first day of the Revolution. It was used as the official calendar of France from November 24, 1793, to December 31, 1804. Its introduction was decreed by the National Convention on October 5, 1793, but the first date was September 22, 1792, because of the autumnal equinox and the day after the proclamation of the Republic. It was divided into 12 months of 30 days, each with a new name. The calendar was assembled by a committee of men. To push even further, they changed the Sabbath system. Instead of resting on the 7th day of each week, people now rested on the 10th. One of the major changes occurred in November of 1793. The cathedral in Paris called Notre Dame was renamed the Temple of Reason to enforce the new religion of reason. A group of officials called the Mission Deputies was created to enforce the de-Christianization of the country. The closing down of churches occurred frequently, and some priests were even forced to marry. This de-Christianization caused a lot of the support for the radical revolution to fade away. Eventually, Robespierre changed the French religion again to the cult of the Spring Being.
On September 29th, the convention extended price fixing from grain and bread to other essential goods, and also fixed wages. This was demanded by the lower class and was issued by the Jacobins, who knew they needed to do it if they wanted to stay in power. They aimed to avoid the threat of more riots, including the horrible bread riots.
Revolutionary Tribunal. The Revolutionary Tribunal was a court which was set up in Paris by the National Convention during the Reign of Terror for the trial of people who were against the revolution and the change of government. On June 10, 1794, the Law of 22 Prairial, which forbade prisoners to use advice for their defense, censored the hearing of witnesses, and made death the only penalty. Before 22 Prairial, the Revolutionary Tribunal had announced the death sentences of 1,220 men in 13 months. During the 49 days between the passing of the law and the fall of Robespierre, 1,376 people were condemned, including many innocent victims. The amount of deaths show how bad the Law of 22 Prairial was. The Law of Suspects was created by the Revolutionary Tribunal to try the people who were suspected for treason against the Republic and to punish the people who committed the crime.
Yeah. What is the impact of the terror or the meaning of the terror in this important historical event called the French or the anti-French Revolution? The French was in evolution. In fact, we went through a century called the Century of Enlightenment, which was a movement started by the French philosophers. When came in 1789 some evolution through, for example, the tennis court oath. Some people came out of the woodwork and created what I call the rule of terror. In other words, they took what was a nice way of making the country evolve faster, and they absolutely destroyed all idealism associated with this evolution that had been going on progress throughout the 18th century and principally in 1789. So very soon, some people coming out of the woodwork came on top of this movement and basically destroyed 1,000 years of history, 1,000 years in terms of building infrastructure, as well as beheading anyone remotely associated with the old regime. And therefore France lost not only its buildings, it lost also hundreds of thousands of people to the guillotine as well as into exile, and basically France lost its soul.
In total, the Reign of Terror was marked by a series of mass executions of the enemies of the Republic. Due to the normal occurrence of death by guillotine, the guillotine became a symbol of this era. The National Convention eventually turns on Robespierre due to his involvement, which led to his beheading, and in 1795, a new government was formed and a new leader would soon rise to power.